Happy day. Oh, you'll wear red today.
Agent Allison, good morning.
Good morning, Junior Superintendent. It's good to see you again.
And to you as well. Oh, welcome, gentlemen.
Hello, ma'am.
Junior Sue.
Salutations, Junior Superintendent.
Salu, whatever to you too. I'm so proud of the work that you all have done in the Super Search. Now, let's get down to business. Allison, give us a quick recap of the process so far.
No problem. This Super Search has been one of the most successful seen by the search firm. We've received 52 applications from 24 states and Canada. The experience of the applicants include 36 doctoral degrees, 7 current superintendents, and 13 former superintendents. It's truly amazing.
Wow, I love it so much. And now, Alessandro, take us through our newest update.
Of course. The board recently chose 7 semifinalists to go on to the next round. These semifinalists are Dr. Harold R. Border, the Chief of High Schools for Orange County Public Schools in Florida. Dr. Jennifer Cupid McCoy, an Area Superintendent for Orange County Public Schools in Florida. Dr. James P. McIntyre, Jr., a university professor and former superintendent of Knox County Schools in Tennessee. Michael J. Ramirez, Deputy Superintendent of Denver Public Schools in Colorado. Frederick R. Hyde, Superintendent for Community Unit School District 300 in Illinois. Dr. T. Nakia Towns, Deputy Superintendent for Hamilton County Schools in Tennessee. And Dr. Antoine L. Hickman, Chief of Student Support Initiatives for Broward County Schools in Florida.
Whew, what a pool. They all seem like great candidates. Tyler, what happens next?
The board has sent questions to the semifinalists who will provide either a written answer or a video answer. Based on those answers, the board will choose which of the semifinalists they want to move on to be finalists.
This is getting so exciting. Trenton, can you cover what the rest of the process looks like?
Absolutely. Based on the answers given by the semifinalists, the board will choose the finalists to do an in-person interview right here in Polk County. Following that interview, the board will make their final decision at the April 27th board meeting.
That's perfect! The transition period will happen during May and June, and the new superintendent will officially take over July 1st. Great job, team. I am so proud of each of you. But the work isn't done yet. We need to keep the community engaged in the process. What advice will you all give?
There will be more opportunities for the public to participate in the remainder of the process, whether in person or virtually. The community can go to polkschoolsfl.com/supersearch to learn more.
The community can also follow Polk County Public Schools on social media for updates, such as Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. They can search for Polk County Public Schools on those platforms.
The school board meetings and work sessions are the best place to get updates as they happen. They are live streamed to YouTube, or you can attend them yourself. For more information, go to polkschoolsfl.com/meetings.
Make your voice heard. If you have thoughts on the candidates, plan to attend the board meeting and make a public comment. You can also contact your district board member via email and let them know your thoughts. This superintendent will be responsible for your children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, etc. Your voice matters.
Wonderful, all of you. This is going to be the best super search of all time. I've said all that I need to say, so thank you for joining me.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to call the March 16th, 2021 Impasse hearing to order. The first item on our agenda today is to accept the agenda. Mrs. Byrd, are there any revisions to the agenda as printed?
There are no revisions at this time.
Board members, the chair will entertain a motion to accept the agenda for the March 16th, 2021 Impasse hearing as printed. Do I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'd like to call for a vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, like sign. Motion carries unanimously. The next item today is public comments on agenda items. There are several people who have signed up to speak. As I call your name, if you would be so kind and come forward. You will have, as usual, 3 minutes to speak to address the board. So I will start with Kat Nickel. Kat, would you please come forward? And after Kat will be Bishop Mincy. And after Bishop Mincy will be Lindsay Hanger. Go ahead.
Hello, so my name is Kat Nickel. Y'all have heard from me before. I'm a Fort County School teacher. I'm at 1055 West 2 Circle in Bartow. And I just came here today to discuss, to briefly remind you what your teachers have been through this year as you try to decide between the district's salary allocation proposal and PEA's. Ours is much more fair, especially for veteran teachers. And y'all are all about retainment. I love the recruitment piece, but as far as retainment goes, telling a brand new teacher that they're gonna get $4,000 and telling a teacher who's been here for 27 years that they're gonna get $600 is a slap in the face. On that note, you still have paras and ESPs who are making less than $10 an hour. That is unacceptable. So I strongly suggest you go with the vote that has already passed in Florida to start upping the minimum wage and help make sure that your employees get there as well. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nickel. Bishop Mincy? Okay. Next we have Lindsay Hanger.
Maybe I shouldn't speak into the speaker, the mic. Can I speak into the mic?
If you could either speak much closer to the mic or take your mask off. That's kind of what everybody's being asked because they're going to try to take minutes and it's really hard to understand.
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Great. I am not Lindsay Hanger, but I'm speaking on her behalf. I explained it to when I filled out the comment, and so
Okay.
this is her official statement she asked me to read. Thank you for taking the time to renegotiate our contracts. However, the added stress of these continued negotiations is unfair to students and staff in the district. We have spent months hearing about vain promises and arguments about minuscule bonuses. At this point, everyone in the school should be compensated for their diligent contributions to student success. Veteran teachers are not compensated fairly with your current proposal, and your continued delay increases the distrust and disillusionment of many seasoned teachers. The majority of teachers do not want to be bothered with this conversation. We care about our students and their success. We expect those above us to take care of our schools, our students, and our working conditions and salaries fairly. This extended back and forth each year to negotiate how much salaries teachers should receive for bonuses, steps, and cost of living increases continually contributes to the negative work environment within the district. 2020 was deemed the year of the teacher by the state, and we have worked more hours and taught more courses and more students than ever before. Polk teachers have not been compensated with either money or extra planning time at this point. Please come to a decision quickly. Please release statements of appreciation that have backing to them. Please consider all the teachers and other staff that daily contribute to student and school success. Thank you for your consideration. Lindsay Hanger.
Thank you to Ms. Hanger. And your name for the record?
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Elizabeth Rasmussen.
Wonderful. Okay, and I have you up next. So I have you next.
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
Okay. My name is Elizabeth Rasmussen. I live in Lakeland. I'm a teacher at Bartow High School. I just wanted to say I spoke at the Impasse hearing about blended learning, and I encourage you to consider that stipend especially. Blended learning teachers have gone above and beyond this year. All our teachers have, but blended learning teachers, as we really do teach and do double the work this year. Also, when it comes to the teacher salary allocation, I would encourage you to go with PEA's proposal. I am a veteran teacher. I've been teaching for 13 years. And with the district's new proposal, I would make $900 more than a brand new teacher that I actually could teach in intro education classes. And that's just very discouraging and disheartening. Money is not the reason I went into education at all. But I do have to be able to pay my rent, and I do have to be able to pay my bills. And $1,500 is much more than $900. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Rasmussen. Okay, I don't have any other green cards. Is there any other green cards for folks that signed up to speak? Welcome. Okay, next we come to our impasse discussion. This is the 2020-2021 impasse resolution public hearing with the Polk County School District and the Polk Education Association. Public Employee Relations Commission, also known as PERC, case SM 2020-19. So board members, at this time I would like to review the procedures that we're going to be using today. First of all, we will begin the hearing today with PEA, and they will have 40 minutes to present. Then the district's bargaining team will have 40 minutes to present as well. Our board, just as a reminder, is acting today in a quasi-judicial role to decide the final resolution to the impasse at this hearing tonight. Our decisions, board members, need to be based solely on the record before you and the presentations that will be given by both PEA and the district. Once the board has had time to discuss the 3 areas of impasse, I will call for a separate vote on each of the 3 impasse issues before us tonight. Are there any questions from the board before we begin? And depending how long it is, if we need to take a recess in the middle, we can do so appropriately. So just kind of let me know if we need to do that. Okay, now I would like to ask the Polk Education Association to begin your presentation. Please introduce yourselves as you speak, because you may have multiple speakers, and you will have 40 minutes in total to present. You may begin.
All right, so we have this up, but it's not moved over. Oh, perfect. Okay, they got it going on back there. So my name is Stephanie Yoakum. I am the president of the Polk Education Association. Presenting with me tonight is Angela Dawson, our bargaining specialist from the Florida Education Association. So we are here tonight because our bargaining unit overwhelmingly wanted to bring this before you. The magistrate hearing was in December, and the magistrate did rule or recommend in our favor for the blended learning stipend, and so that has been tentatively agreed to. But we are here tonight over the paraeducator, secretary clerical, and the teacher salary proposals. We represent around 9,000 of your employees in those 3 contracts, and their voice was heard loud and clear. They wanted to bring this before you tonight. So hopefully you can do the right thing by our employees. And so we will start tonight. It's just a reminder for those of you that may not have ever been through an impasse hearing before. When we bargain, there are certain things that we have tentatively agreed to already that are already in the package. And so really tonight, we're just bringing before you what PEA rejected from the magistrate. And that will go out for ratification to our bargaining unit with the things that we have already tentatively agreed to with the district. And so currently in Polk County, our support staff minimum wage is below $10 an hour. Our paras make $9.11 an hour at their lowest wage, and our secretary clerical units make $8.57 an hour at their lowest wage. PEA has proposed a new minimum hourly wage for paras at $10.27 an hour and secretary clericals at $10.01 an hour. We are also recommending that all current paraeducators and secretary clericals move up one experience level, and this is retroactive to July 1 of 2020. The district has proposed a no wage increase for our support staff this year. So on the next slide, and you have this in your binders so that you can see it on paper, so you don't have to look all the way over to the screen. But our total cost out with benefits, so with the increased FRS, with the increased FICA benefits, for our support staff would be $2.16 million total to the general fund. And so before you, in this next slide, is a map of Florida. And the green counties are all the counties that currently pay their support staff more than $10 an hour, or right at 10. Polk is the big red county in the middle that currently pays their support staff below $10 an hour. Most of our surrounding counties in Central Florida pay their support staff more than $10 an hour at this point. Some $11, $12, and even $13 an hour. And there's really very few counties in the state that still only pay less than $10 an hour at this point, with Polk being one of them. And so really it's very simple for our support staff. The cost to the general fund would be minimal, and it would put our support staff on the path to a living wage. We're going to have to do this anyway by September 30th of this year, but this also gives our paraeducators and our secretary clericals step movement as well, because we don't want to get into a situation where we're just compressing the bottom of the schedule to be compliant with the constitutional amendment. We want to make sure that we are also valuing the experience we have in those contracts so that they see salary wage improvements as well. And so the teacher salary increase allocation, we had very different looking, well, not very different, but different looking proposals that went before the magistrate. After the magistrate came back with his recommendation to go with the district proposal, our bargaining team looked at the district proposal and wanted to, while we still are very opposed to compression because of what it does to future salary negotiations by putting that many people in one salary level, we're also realists, and it was inevitable that we had lost the compression argument at that point. And so we went back and really dug into the district's proposal, and we were able to present to the district bargaining team on February 25th a revised proposal, which is in your packet. And you also received that in an email, hopefully through Susan or Wes, earlier, that was able to, through compression, match the district's minimum base salary for teachers to $45,172. And that is one thing that we agree on, is that even though the district did reject our salary proposal from the 25th, Mrs. Porteous did state, we do agree to the minimum teacher base salary of $45,172. So that is something that we agree on, okay? And so we're gonna point that out as we move through, because that is something that we have come to an agreement on. Now, we will talk about in later slides this $2.89 million in yearly recurring funds that the district has costed out that they say our proposal will cost. That is inaccurate, and we will go through how and why that is inaccurate. Okay. So we have met, both sides have met the 80% requirement set forth in the law that dictates this salary allocation. We both agree that through compression, we can get to $45,172 as a minimum base salary for teachers in Polk County. which is really where we landed last March in preliminary talks with Mike Perrone. And we had pulled apart what the allocation was going to be for Polk. And we thought, based on preliminary numbers, we could get between 44 and 45, even last March when this budget first came out. So we're pretty close. We're right at the mark. And both proposals have always included pre-kindergarten teachers. Nobody's made below the base, and these funds have never applied to substitutes. So we really have met both sides the 80% mark. And so that is something else that we agree on. Now, in this slide, you see the comparisons of the PEA counter and the district counter. So again, we agree to the minimum base salary of $45,172. Where we have some differences is that the district states that they can only provide our veteran teachers with $650. While we were able to rework a few things with their proposal and get $1,500 to our veteran teachers, which would be the lowest raise increase that our teacher unit would see. And that tends to be more in line with our comparable districts around the state, and we will also show you that in a few slides. So how were we able to do that? Two things that we did when we looked at the district's proposal. We reworked their compression slightly, where the district collapsed the first 12 levels on the pay for performance schedule to get $45,172. We were able to compress in two groups. And so that did free up some money by compressing in two groups and still getting to the $45,172. The second thing that we did was we significantly decreased the number of vacancies the district added into their $45,172 minimum base salary, because at this point in the year, we know that we're not hiring any other teachers. The only other people that could possibly move into the teacher salary schedule would be the 152 provisional subs that we have currently employed and working in our classrooms. And that's only if they meet certification requirements to be eligible for a temporary certificate. So those are the only people at this point that could even possibly move onto the teacher salary schedule. Because even in a normal year, this time of year, we would be having a hiring freeze. We would not be hiring any more people as we prepare and look at FTE counts for the coming school year. And so imaginary teachers don't get checks. And we know at this point, 532 people is a gross inflation of what you would actually be paying out. And so the district team, in their presentation, will most likely claim the following. They'll most likely claim that PEA's revised teacher proposal will cost the district about $2.8 million outside of the allocation. And that is incorrect. The only significant cost over this allocation given by the state legislature would be if 532 teachers magically show up and we hire them for the last 2 months of school, which we know historically doesn't happen. The second thing the district team will most likely claim is that the PEA proposal does not meet the requirement of the 80% requirement set forth in this allocation law. And that is also incorrect. Classroom teachers currently earning less than $47,500 would be eligible to receive money from that part of the allocation, because the law states that the goal salary is $47,500. And districts that are unable to get there, many districts, Polk included, they have to get to the maximum amount achievable. But that doesn't mean that those teachers still can't get, could have been a part of that 80% allocation. And both sides agree that $45,172 is the maximum amount that we can get to. And while we have broken down the district's proposal into the 80% for classroom teachers, because the 80% is also very specific in that it has to be for classroom teachers. So non-classroom teachers cannot be part of that piece of the allocation. And so we will show you that 80% breakdown in just a few slides. So the next couple of slides you're going to see are some cost outs of this allocation. So Polk was awarded about $15.2 million after the charter school allotment was taken out. We got about $18 million to start with, about $3 million went to charter. We were left with about $15.2. So about $12.18 million is the 80%, about $3 million is the 20% in the allocation for the law. And so the first cost out that you are seeing is with no vacancies. And these are with updated staffing numbers that the district gave us on March 8th when they had costed out our February 25th proposal. And so they had stated that there were 532 vacancies, but we think it's important to look at what you would actually be paying out with the people we currently have employed with Polk County Public Schools. And so if you look at costing out with no vacancies, our current proposal on the table is only over by about $650,000. The district, if you pull out vacancies, leaves $3 million on the table. And this is not general fund money. This is money in a categorical that we would either have to give back to the legislature and quite possibly, with sessions still in, they could decrease our allocation by $3 million if we don't spend this money on the teachers currently in Polk County. It's a categorical. This is not general fund money that can roll over into your general fund. And so the next slide is a cost out comparison with adding the 532 vacancies in. And so when you add the 532 vacancies in, yes, we are over quite a bit, by about $3.2 million. And if you subtract out the 650, that's about where the district's getting that $2.8 million that we would, that they claim we would be incurring annually. And that's just not true, because again, you can't pay people that aren't here. And even with 532 vacancies, the district still leaves $430,000 on the table. And so the next slide is costing out with the provisional subs. Now, Mrs. Porteous had said out of the 532 vacancies, 152 of them were provisional subs. And so even if all 152 provisional subs meet what they have to do for certification requirements to get their temporary certificate, we would only be paying them a teacher's salary for about 2 months, 2.5 months, if every single one of them today were to have passed their subject area and get their temporary. And so 152, we got about a quarter of the year left. That's where the 38 cost out comes from. Because again, this is actual dollars that we're trying to cost out that we would incur under this allocation. And so even if every single provisional sub were to become a certified teacher at this point in the year, we would only be over $838,000. The district, even with these provisional subs costed in at this point in the year, still leaves just under $3 million on the table. So the goalpost keeps moving here. And so at the beginning of the year, when they first gave us their current counter on September 28th, they said there were 800 vacancies costed out. And so we met with them because we thought 800 was pretty high for the end of September. And Mrs. Porteous and Mr. Perrone and their team did agree that 800 seemed kind of high. And so in early October, they came back with 454 vacancies, about half of the vacancies that they had costed in that base salary. Right before the magistrate hearing, we had asked for an updated vacancy list, and they're right at about 35 vacancies at that point. After we had proposed our recent proposal that you have before you, when they had given us our cost out, we were using 35 vacancies because that was the current number we had. And then in their cost out, they come back and say, whoa, wait, there's 532 vacancies. And so that comes into play when we look at the 80% allotment. And so when you're looking at the 80% allotment, what you're seeing here are teachers, classroom teachers. So this doesn't include coaches or deans or anybody that's designated as non-classroom. These are classroom teachers that currently make below $47,500 that would be eligible for the 80% pot of the teacher salary allocation. And so with no vacancies based on current staffing numbers that were provided by the district on March 8th, the PEA current proposal spends 93% of that 80%, so almost all of it. The district's proposal without vacancies, so actually paying the people that we have here in Polk right now working for us, they only use 82% of this allocation for the 80%. And so when we go down further, when we add in the provisional subs, and when you do this report, the cost out was a little bit different than the actual number, because when you provide this report to the DOE, you're not cutting people into quarters. So we reported if all 152 provisional subs were to in fact become certified teachers, they would be in the number in that base reporting. With those provisional subs added only, the PEA proposal spends 99% of the 80% amount of money, while the district's proposal still only spends 88% of that 80% allotment for classroom teachers under $47,500. Now, the next slide that we are going to look at on slide 17, the next two are district-to-district comparisons. And so the one before you now is using staffing numbers that were from the fall in September, when they provided us this proposal originally. So with 800 vacancies added into that base salary, that's how they're getting to a little bit over 100% of using that 80% allocation. Without the 800 vacancies, the district in September would have only used 70% of this 80% pot of money, with actual teachers that are working for Polk County Public Schools. So if we move to the current proposal, and their proposal hasn't changed since September, but the staffing numbers and the vacancies seem to be a moving target. And we know staffing numbers are always a moving target. It can change from one day to the next. But now, it just so happens that with 532 vacancies, with the new staffing numbers updated, that the 80% allotment is at 103% used. And without the 532 vacancies, they still only spend about 82% of this 80% designated for classroom teachers under $47,500. And so this has been a vacancy game that has been a moving target all year. And we have really tried on our side to pay the people that we have with Polk County Public Schools currently. We have really tried to look at the vacancy numbers to make sure that we are not going over or under, so that we're getting as much money to teachers as we possibly can under this allocation. And so where we seem to be at now is with, we both agree on the minimum again, but with our $1,500 as the minimum amount, we're able to give every teacher at least a 2% raise, and that's classroom and non-classroom, okay? And that's part of the designation in this bill too, is that classroom teachers who do not receive at least a 2% raise under that 80% need to get a 2% raise somewhere under the 20%. And with the $1,500, we're able to do that. With the district's $650, without utilizing the money to the optimal abilities, they're only able to give 47% of all teachers at least a 2% raise with $650. 51% of classroom teachers would see at least a 2%, and 27% of non-classroom teachers would see at least a 2%. We are asking for equity here. As much equity as we can get under the parameters of this law. And we feel that our revised proposal does that. And so next, we have some comparisons to Central Florida and then the rest of the state. Every single Central Florida district listed here, with the exception of Hillsborough, who is in a particularly interesting financial situation right now, every other district was able to give their lowest raise amount way more than Polk County is offering their veteran teachers. Most of them are in line with what we're asking for. Now, if you go to other Florida districts that were not able to get to 47.5, you can see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 that we pulled from that were not able to get to 47.5 that are giving right around $1,500. Some a little bit more, some a little bit less. With Hendry County only getting to 45.1, but still being able to provide their veteran teachers with about $3,000. Even DeSoto County, little DeSoto that's just south of us, under Hendry, they were able to get to 45.2, but they were still able to give their veteran teachers $28.50. And so, averages across Florida, there were 14 counties that did provide additional funding, and the average additional money contributed by district is about $1.8 million, with the range being 0 to $9 million. The PEA proposal is asking for $650,000 to make this work. The average raise amount for veteran teachers across the state, so the lowest raise increment was about $1,300, which is right in line with what we're asking for. And then Angela is going to explain how you can afford this.
So I'm Angela Dawson. I'm going to take this off so they can hear me better. I used to work at PEA for many years. I have met with many of you school board members to talk about the district's budget for a very long time. I now work for the Florida Education Association, so I get to do a road show every once in a while. So we're going to talk about your financial condition. I heard a quote recently that really struck me when we were getting ready for this. It's, show me your budget and I'll show you your priorities. I even stuttered like he does when he talks. How about that? So there's some facts that we know when we're looking at the budget. We know that staff turnover always garners us a savings in employee salaries and benefits. We know that there's been a significant number of vacancies this year. We also know that the FRS increased the rate to 10% that's based on salary, and that those payroll taxes are now 17.65 or approximately 18% of something that you have to pay for. We know that 13.26% of all PEA employees are paid from funds other than the general fund, and that total by salary is about 10% of the salaries for the PEA group. So while we're talking about general fund, you also have other funds that are going to be paying for a predominant number of your paras who work for the ESC classrooms. We also know that charter schools are funded from the $5,300 purchase services line item, and they're not budgeted for in salaries and benefits. It's very important to know that this is a fact. We know that you have budgeted $45 million for salaries, 100, in the 2021 year in the general fund, and that the increase amount that you have to budget for last year's rate is just the 0.0153. So between the old rate and the new rate, it went up by $1.53 for every dollar of salary. Not for every dollar, but for the percentage. All right, so there's typical savings. Sometimes you have fewer staff. Sometimes you freeze wages until you have a settlement. So you're going to see some discrepancies in your spending because of when you settle a contract from year to year. And then we also see lapse. And in Polk, we've had lapse as much as $23 million in a year and as low as $8 million in a year, depending on how many positions needed to be replaced. Because when you replace a teacher with a master's degree and 30 years of experience and you hire someone with a bachelor's degree with no experience, there's a difference in those salaries. And it also impacts the benefits that are based on salaries. Then we have some atypical, and I'll just call them calculation errors, costing more than just the general fund positions, including special revenue and grants in your data, including non-FRS salaries into the calculations, and costing an excessive number of vacancies. So in your district financials in January, you received a packet, and in your book we have the just a few sample pages in there that we've pulled from your budget book. But when you're looking at this in your district financials, your cover page says that overall, in the current year, we have revenues are slightly less than the prior year. This we know because of the state funding. And that the current projections are down by 4.44%, but overall expenses are even lower than that. So while revenues are slightly down, expenses are down even more. And expenses remain in control and are running 8.5% below budget through month 7. And that you have an ending fund balance forecasted to be 6.86%. But that's assuming that everything remains the same. There were a lot of things that we did not know when the budget was set, including the American Rescue Plan, which we'll soon be seeing money for. In your budget book on page 12, I've blown up a section of it for you so that you can see it. So it talks about the assigned and unassigned fund balance being 6.86%. However, if you look at your current actual amount of revenue versus expensive, your actual fund balance at this very moment is 10.83%. The state requires that you keep a minimum of 3. So you're in double digits. This chart might look familiar to a few of you that have met with me over time. So this is the fund balances for the last 5 years. The blue is what you budget. The red is what you spend. There's always a variation, but the goal each year is to close the gap between what you budget and what you spend to the best of your ability. Last year, you guys were predicted to drop very close to 3. The bottom here is not 0, the bottom here is 3. So I've just cut off the bottom 3%, saying it doesn't matter. What's above the 3% does. If I was actually going to graph your current fund balance here, you'd have to draw a line to the top of the financial condition chart and draw another line up to meet it, because this is your estimated 6.86%. So where's all this money coming from? Where is all this going? Part of it's because you've frozen salaries at this point. Part of it is because we do have other expenses that we aren't doing. We have a lot of vacancies. We also know that there's FRS that we had to budget for. In the district's presentation to the special magistrate, they include this number of $8.7 million that they have to spend on FRS. When we first had this discussion with Mike Perrone, he thought it was going to eat up all $9 million of your new money for this year. I estimated it at $7 million, and here's how I did it. I looked at your annual financial report, your total salaries in your general fund, and I looked for that 0.0153 and came up with $7 million. So who was right? Want to take some bets? In October, the district supplied us with a spreadsheet that has 17,000 lines on it, and I can't give it to you here and scroll around, so what I have is a pivot table from their data. You can see on this, it's circled in red, the 8.6 million. So if you look at the center column, it says the sum of the FRS increases over time. But on the left-hand side, you can see the employee groups. I have an employee group in yellow for you, the charter schools. They don't come out of your budget. Their money flows through your language from the state, and they get budgeted in their own fashion. If they participate in FRS, they have to pay it out of their funding. So the only way you get to 8.6 million is you have to first calculate people that aren't in your general fund, in your budget, and you have all those vacancies. Literally in this table of 17,000 lines are people whose last names are star and first names are vacant. Well, this is curious. Let's look at this some more. There was literally salary that was in here calculated and FRS calculated on these vacant positions to get to the 8.6 number. So if you take your 8.6 and you back out your charter schools and you back out the $588,000, you get back down to 7.1. So who was right? That difference of $1.6 million means this was money that they presumed that was going to be spent on other things that's not going to be spent on FRS. It's really money that you can spend on your support staff at this point. Here's some more. from the district data from October. Again, I wanted to see what percentage and salaries were from the general fund and special revenue. So the first column is everybody counted up people in the general fund. The second one is everybody else, special revenue, grants, etc. The sum of the salary. So I have the number of positions by percent and the number of salary by percent. Because again, every time we get data, we spend hours scrubbing it to try to figure out, okay, they didn't include the percentages this time, so I don't know if this is a part-time employee or a full-time employee, but I can guess from their salary that it looks like they're part-time. Oh, these people are really charter schools, we don't include them in our funding, so we spend a lot of time chasing down data, trying to make it match up. So I'm just showing you what I see when the data that was provided. So then you talk about lapse and vacancies. Your own January report said you've spent 50% of your budgeted line item for instruction this year. 7/12 of the year, you've spent 50%. At this rate, you're only going to spend 85% of what you've actually budgeted for instruction. And again, don't forget the federal stimulus dollars from CARES 1, CARES 2, and the American Recovery Act that are coming down to support us. The vacancies. Again, we had people in your table whose first name was vacant, their last name was star. They had salaries in FRS. And so we've been chasing this vacancy number. So we started out at the beginning of the year, and they said, all right, October, here's the count of employees. Here's how many vacancies we have. So we have a calculation of how many actual employees there were. Then in March, we get a report, this time only PEA employees, so I can't fill in the other blanks for you. But if they started out the year saying that we thought we were going to have 597 openings, we have 44 vacancies, which meant we actually have 553 people. In their March report, they had 536 people. More vacancies, more lapsed salary dollars. Look at the numbers from the teachers. We started with 8,043 with 835 vacancies. In March, we actually had 6,780 actual teachers. So when you're looking at the actual numbers, and you start looking at, okay, back to my data, count up all of the people whose last name is star. That's what this is. This is a count of every employee by each employee group who has the last name star and the first name vacant. This is the sum of the salary that's included, the FRS, and the health insurance. I wasn't aware that we paid health insurance for our coaches, but there's $800,000 that was in the spreadsheet. Okay? Charter school, again, green. Line 5,300. They don't come out of salary. We don't pay benefits. They go in right in the purchase services flow through to the charter schools. It's inaccurate to calculate them when you're counting up how much money is spent in FRS. So I showed you that we had loss of positions that are vacant. I've circled for you the people whose last name are star that are union and para, and then teacher. And the reason that you want to look at the teacher is it says that there's $21 million there that they were looking at when they were trying to craft this that we already know are just vacancies that we aren't going to spend. So this is the cost of vacancies. Even if we only have 100 vacancies, that would be 1/8 of that number. So vacancies matter, lapse matters. It creates money that if you don't spend it on your people, and Rocky Yearwood and I had this conversation a long time ago. Those of you who've been around for a long time remember Rocky. He offered me a job once. I didn't take it. But he and I were looking at the vacancies and the turnover, and we thought we had a pretty good idea of how to identify how much money is lost with the vacancies. And we had kind of a formula that the turnover actually funds almost a step movement. That was before the state started to cut our money from $10 per thousand down. So, I mean, it's a little bit different world. But you have to, in a district this size, you have to look at how many times you're filling a position and what your average is of hiring in that position to know how to budget for it. Otherwise, you're going to constantly be pretending like you're going to spend $21 million that you're not. We all know you're not going to spend it. So let's add it up. The support staff cost of their proposal is $2.16. We know that there's a $1.6 million overestimate to the FRS, so there's money left from the original fund that you were given from the stakes. You guys got about $9 million new money. The support staff vacancies alone are $485,000. So the cost minus the savings is the difference here literally is $75,000. And if I go back and recalculate the difference of 14 more ESP vacancies and 22 more para vacancies, it's about another $100,000. So really, the vacancies alone pay for this. It's not that hard. Here's another budget, page 6. It's kind of hard to read, so you might want to look at it from your budget document rather than the spreadsheet. But I just have to say, look at January 2021 to January 2020. So I've blown this line up for instruction. It says that in January 2021, you've spent $327 million on salaries. This first negative number is the difference between what's budgeted versus what was spent to date. But look at January 20 for instruction. You spent $344 million on salaries for your instructional line item last year in the same month. This next number, negative $17 million, is the difference. That's where you are. You are $17 million lower in your instruction spending this year than you were last year. So why are we quibbling about $600,000 to implement a plan that will put money in the pockets of your employees? And not only that, CARES, $30 million, $138 million, American Recovery Act, which is guaranteed to be even more. We don't have the breakdown yet. As of this date, your district has encumbered $10.1 million of that. You need to figure out how to spend probably $200 million. Now, some of it you'll be able to save from year to year, but there's so many things that you ought to be refunding into your fund balance on spending. If you are buying cleaning supplies, it's related to COVID. If you have health insurance costs that are related to emergency rooms that are coded, and they ask the question, they are coded, $4 million in 2020 that could go back to your health insurance plan out of the CARES Act. You need to do it. Last but not least, you're the largest employer in Polk County, and what you pay the staff sets the tone for the county. You have to use these funds wisely to move the dollars into the community, and you do that through raises. If you raise the money in their pockets, they will spend it here in the county and grow the economy. They'll buy food, clothing, health care. If you choose not to adopt it and you go with the district's FLAW plan, you harm the economy, you harm the people, and you'll have staff that will need to apply for rental assistance and use food banks to feed their families. It's not the only thing to do. PEA, it's the right thing to do. Whew. I got fast there at the end.
Thank you so much for your presentation. And am I on? Okay, now I would like to ask the district's bargaining team to begin their presentation. Please introduce yourselves as you speak, and you will have 40 minutes to present as well. And you may begin.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members of the board. My name is Michael Mattamore. I'm with the law firm of Allen, Norton & Blue, and I've had the pleasure for several years now to represent Polk County Schools, and I'm proud of that opportunity. We would like to first take you briefly through the impasse resolution process that leads us to where we are tonight. The PEA declared an impasse in negotiations. A special magistrate was appointed by the state who considered evidence and recommended a resolution. The PEA rejected the special magistrate's recommendations. The school board conducts this hearing and then resolves this impasse. Then the board's resolution of the contract language at issue and other agreed upon language not at impasse is sent to the bargaining unit members for ratification. If voted down, the issues at impasse are resolved by the board and become contract language. If voted for ratification, then the parties have a contract. The role of the board is set forth in Florida statutes. The legislative body shall take such action as it deems to be in the public interest, including the interest of the public employees involved, to resolve all disputed impasse issues. So we have the PEA, which has approximately 6,800 teachers, 1,630 para-educators, 538 educational support personnel. AFSCME is still in the negotiations, but the district's proposal for AFSCME is 0, and the non-union employee wage increases for this year is 0. Now, that's an important comparator set forth in statute that we have to take into consideration. How are we treating the PEA in relation to the other employees that are in with the district? The collective bargaining in 2020 began in July, and there was 10 separate occasions of meetings. They reached several significant agreements, on return to work issues, a 2021 health plan, the number of paychecks per month, and increased benefits for terminal sick leave pay for all 3 of the PEA units. We went to mediation. The district agreed to offer 2 options for paychecks per month in addition to the 1 paycheck per month schedule that was agreed to. We are facing an FRS benefit cost increase of $8.7 million. We disagree with the calculation of the PEA that was just presented to you. We have a self-funded health plan, and the cost for that health plan increased in 2021 by $9.3 million as agreed to the parties to allow us 60 days in reserve and address a 5-year plan that we were committed to. The PA declared impasse on September 23rd. The issues at impasse was the 2021 salary for all PEA groups, the blended learning stipend. We've reached an agreement on the blended learning stipend, and it's no longer at impasse. That is going to cost $1.75 million. A special magistrate was appointed to consider all of the issues that are before you tonight. We were pleased to have this very learned and experienced gentleman to consider these issues, to consider the evidence, to consider the data. He's practiced labor law since 1971. He's been a special magistrate in dozens and dozens of these types of cases. He served for many years. His primary job in his career was he was the general counsel for the state teachers union. So he has that perspective. He can read a budget. He understands how these funding issues are to be played out. He also served as the assistant superintendent for the city of Port Charlotte for their human resources, and he was an elected school member and served on the Leon County School Board. So here's somebody with a wealth of knowledge, a specialist in this area. The special magistrate is directed by 447, 405 Florida statutes to consider certain statutory factors and then make a recommendation. One of these few factors is comparable salaries. He looked at the comparable salaries of teachers, paras, and clericals from what was identified as our comparable districts. He did the analysis, and he came to the conclusion that we compare very favorably. We saw some information just now about where we don't compare favorably, but the magistrate found otherwise. And his analysis can be found in his report at tab 2, pages 25 to 30. He also has to look at the interest and welfare of the public and the availability of funds. Again, he disagreed with the PEA with regard to availability of funds. He repeatedly delved deeply into our budget and our funding sources and came to the conclusion that we did not have the money to fund the PEA's proposal and recommended our proposal. That is found, again, at tab 20, pages 47 and pages 58. And I digress from the presentation for just a second to respond to the lengthy presentation on vacancies and shortfall of our obligation to the FRS, it was completely explained in the same manner to the special magistrate at that hearing. Evidence was given to the special magistrate, and the special magistrate, again, in his report, found that the vacancies would not permit the funding to allow for the requested increase. The special magistrate at page 47 and 58 of his report again goes into an analysis that the vacancies in the FRS based on lapse cannot fund these increases because these positions are not being eliminated. They are going to come back. They are going to be an obligation of this district. We didn't eliminate 532 positions. We have them, and we have to budget for them going forward. The special magistrate's recommendations can be found on the next page, and he stated, regarding wage proposals for paraprofessionals and education support personnel, it is recommended that the parties adopt the district's proposed wage freeze. He said, it is recommended further that when the implementing language is passed to the upcoming Florida legislative session, the parties return to the bargaining table to determine how to satisfy the constitutionally mandated increases to the minimum wage for district employees. It's not prudent to get ahead of this situation. The legislature is currently taking up how we are going to go about funding and how we are going to go about implementing the constitutional minimum wage. It's up in the air right now. He also said, regarding wage proposals for instructional personnel, it is recommended that the parties adopt the district's proposal. The superintendent accepts the special magistrate's recommendations, requests that you accept these same recommendations, and that all disputed issues at impasse are resolved by the adoption of the superintendent's recommendation for the resolution of the impasse. This is, if I may remind you, negotiations over 2021. That's this year. But we still are going to be bargaining for next year. We're going to be looking at wages for next year. We're going to have the benefit of the legislative session being over as we go forward, know more about the minimum wage, and we're going to be talking about these things further. But tonight, when we resolve these issues, the superintendent's recommendation is to be fiscally prudent, providing competitive increases and maintaining high-quality standards. On this next page, we break down the comparative costs of what we are going to propose to spend and what the union is proposing to spend. Ours is $12.9 million. The union's is $18 million. We would have to commit from somewhere another $5.1 million of resources in order to fund this proposal. So what we are asking for tonight is an implementation of the monies received from the legislature under the teacher salary increase allocation, but that for paraeducators and educational support personnel, wages are status quo with no increase. The district proposes the distribution of funds pursuant to the law, House Bill 641, TSIA, and 5001, which is the General Appropriations Act. That's $18 million to the Polk County School District. But $2.2 million has to be backed out for Social Security, FRS, Medicare, and $12.9 million then goes directly to paychecks per state methodology. The state is quite clear about how we go about doing this. 80% of those funds have to be spent to increase the minimum base salary for eligible teachers to the highest number possible. We cannot go into that 80% by any means, even trying to recapture through vacancies and spend it otherwise. There will be consequences. The rest of the individuals who do not meet, not share the 80% are to share the remaining 20%, which is $650. The PEA still proposes a methodology contrary to law through a blending method of funds. The original impasse proposal cost an additional $2.6 million without benefits above the legislative TSIA. The current proposal also costs an additional $2.9 million without benefits and continues to ask the board to adopt an unlawful TSIA schedule. Again, the special magistrate considered the law, read the law, understood the position and the formula that was suggested by the PEA, and rejected it, and said that if we were to do so, we would put those funds in jeopardy. So the PEA's compensation proposal for paraeducation ESP groups plays out like this in terms of cost. The ESP para bargain units advance one experience level and an increase to advancement levels. The total para ESP increase is $2.17 million, $1.3 for the paraeducators and $825,000 for the educational support personnel. So the grand total for all three bargaining units of the PEA proposal is $5.1 million in recurring monies, not to be covered by non-recurring monies. I want to talk a little bit about the TSIA because I want to put that in perspective for everyone and to talk about how these funds can be endangered, this $12 million. It's a boost for K-12 education in Florida. The governor and the Florida legislature appropriated $500 million to increase the minimum base salaries for teachers. Its purpose is to recruit and retain individuals to this profession. It sets the base teacher salary so that it is nationally competitive. Its intent is to raise Florida's minimum base salaries for teachers to $47,500 or the maximum amount. And we have reached agreement that for our purposes, that maximum amount is, get to that in a second. 45,000. That was our number. At the hearing, it was disputed by the PEA, but now we all have landed on the same number. Florida will rank in the top 5 of the nation, moving up from 26th in the nation in starting teacher salaries. The eligibility for these funds is that 80% of the entire TSIA is to increase minimum base salary for classroom teachers, as defined in 1002-2A Florida statutes and certified pre-kindergarten teachers to $47,500 of the maximum amount. Minimum base salary is defined as the lowest annual base salary reported on a district's salary schedule for a full-time classroom teacher. The total amount of TSIA to the Polk County School Board for this minimum base salary increase, the 80%, is $10,354,484. This is going to increase the teacher's new minimum base salary from $40,972 to $45,172. This is what we are achieving through our proposal. The new minimum base salary from the TSA increases the starting minimum salary at the district by $4,200. By law, the remaining 20% of the TSA must be used for classroom teachers who did not receive an increase from the allocation, who received less than 2%, and other full-time instructional personnel defined by 1012012 B and D. This is what we have done through our proposal. Since none of the PEA's proposals comport with the TEA, it is depriving the teachers and the community of $18 million. Because these monies will not be approved, they will not be released by the DOE. They will not be able to be given to the teachers unless we are compliant. And the special master looked at this and agreed. The special magistrate looked at this and agreed. There's an EEO guidance memo on July 17, 2020 that says, before receiving funds, each school district and each public charter school must develop a salary distribution plan that clearly delineates the planned distribution of funds in House Bill 641. The Department of Education has to approve, or these funds will not be released. If you look at the October 8th memo from the Department of Education at tab 5, it told the Union County School District that if they were not compliant with TSIA, Union County at that point, using a formula similar to what is proposed by the PEA in our situation, they will not receive the release of the money. And in fact, is a suggestion by the commissioner that action can be taken to punish the school district for not being compliant. HB 641 prevents that these allocated funds be collective bargained for other purposes. We cannot play with these numbers. The teacher salary increase allocation must be used solely to comply with the requirements of the section, and that's the language of House Bill 641. It's intended to be a statewide shift for the minimum base salary. Before the TSIA passage, 43% of educators in Florida were paid $47,500 or more. Afterwards, 61% of teachers in Florida will be paid at least $47,500. Now, one of the things that is in our numbers is that the district has to calculate its 80-20 allocation and back out FRS, FICA, and Medicare. So, Heather, if you could take the board members through the next few slides.
The district calculation of...
Please introduce yourself.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Heather Jenkins. I'm the acting CFO for the district.
Thank you.
The district calculation of the distribution begins with the FEFP calculation of $18,039,377. The charter school amount is deducted from that, leaving $15,277,563. From that amount, you have to take out the FRS, the FICA, and that leaves you with $12,943,105. Once you get to that amount, that's when you can do the 80-20% split. On the next slide is PEA's calculation of the distribution. So what they do is they start with the initial allocation, they remove the charter school piece, leaving the district allocation, and then they divide that portion into the 80 and 20% without removing the FRS and FICA. This amount does not include the additional $2.9 million that they are requesting we add in from the general fund. The following slide, what this slide does is it illustrates the use of the funds. So the district calculated the 80% at $10,354,484. That utilizes 97% to bring our classroom teachers up to $45,173 as the minimum. The remaining 3% is used towards bringing all the other teachers up to that minimum salary. PEA calculates their 80% at $12,182,050. They utilize 53% of that amount to bring their classroom teachers up to $45,173 as the minimum salary. The remaining 47% went towards giving increases in varying amounts to existing teachers, which goes against the directive of the statute. The main differences are the method of calculation and the number of vacancies, as Mr. Matamore addressed. You have to budget based on your staffing plan so that when you do fill those positions, you do have the funds to pay those employees.
We would also like to point out that the 2021 General Appropriations Act, dealing with the significant economic setbacks of the COVID pandemic, featured $1 billion in vetoes of appropriations. Luckily, $500 million for the TSIA was preserved in that budget. But we're facing an unprecedented budget crisis. The TSIA is not guaranteed as recurring monies, but it may it may not be, but may be allocated annually. So we may have a General Appropriations Act for 21 that does not have the $500 million in it. But districts are not permitted to absent the GAA, reducing prior TSI increases. So we would have to find that funds in our budget to cover that. And we have stated in the past, it's reflected and accepted by the special magistrate, that the Polk County's school district is not funded equally to other districts. Salaries have been historically prioritized. Fund balances cannot be further reduced. The CARES Act money that was referenced, it needs specific approval by the Department of Education, and that's a non-recurring, one-time injection of funds. The pandemic funds, including the CARES Act, the Recovery Act, those that have been mentioned, we can't rely on them tonight to fund a recurring wage increase. Those funds are unknown, and we don't know when they'll be realized. We don't know what restrictions will be placed on those funds. We don't know if the state budget cuts are going to offset those funds. It will reduce funding as a result of those. In any event, as we have already stated, those funds are one-time monies that should not be used for a recurring wage increase. All Florida school districts can expect the funding on per-student basis to return to normal in 21-22. The hold harmless of the state is not expected to be continued into 21-22. And on the next slide, we have a statement, a letter by the Speaker of the House of Representatives dated February 11th, 2021, which is in our tab 6. He says, "These have been extraordinary times, and we will be feeling the consequences of this pandemic for years to come. One of the areas that the pandemic will greatly impact will be the budget of the state of Florida. The October 2020 FTE survey revealed that the state's total FTE student membership decreased by an alarming 87,811 FTE students statewide, 3% of the entire student population. The hold harmless provision has allowed school districts to retain $700 million of taxpayer funds over and above what would otherwise be permitted under the law. However, this accommodation does not reflect a fundamental change in how Florida funds our school system. For the 21-22 state budget, the Florida House intends to align the per-pupil funding of our K-12 schools to our actual enrollment in those schools." That's by the Speaker. And on the next slide, the Speaker also says in that letter, "In addition to the almost $750 million in extra state funds school districts have and will continue to receive billions of dollars in new federal funding, these federal dollars are one-time payments and should not be used to pay for or augment recurring obligations like is requested by the PEA tonight. I caution you in the strongest possible terms to align your recurring expenses with your recurring revenues. School districts should allocate their federal dollars to items that are non-recurring in nature, such as deferred maintenance projects that improve the health and safety of our students and teachers. With these resources, school districts have the opportunity to replace aging HVAC systems, retrofit older windows and doors, install air purification and cleaning systems, and complete other renovations that improve air quality and reduce the risk of viral and environmental health hazards. As we know, Polk County is the 4th lowest funded district in the state, but the 7th largest. The fund balance is the 3rd lowest in the state from the most recently reported audit statements to the Department of Education. Polk County School District is one of the largest districts in the state and the nation in number of students. But funding is not equal among the districts in the state, and Polk is one of the lowest per student in the state. But our salaries, as found by the special magistrate, are highly competitive with those districts that are funded better than us. The district does not recommend depleting the fund balance with additional recurring unbudgeted salary increases. On the next slide, we have your fund balance policy of not less than 5%. Districts that failed to maintain a minimum of 3 risk intervention from the state. And Heather is going to talk about what has been happening with our fund balance.
I'd like to address a little bit about the fund balance calculation. PEA mentioned that we had a 10.83% total fund balance. That is correct, but when the state does the calculation, they take the total assigned fund balance and the total unassigned fund balance, and then you divide that by new revenue. And what that means is you don't use any of your existing fund balance or any transfers. So the 10.83 includes restricted items, which those are your categoricals and general fund grants and inventory, things that you can't spend and can't be redirected to other items. The board only has the discretion for assigned and unassigned at that point. So I just wanted to clear up the difference. This slide has been shared with you previously by Mr. Perrone. It shows the funding per student as compared to the fund balances. And several years ago, the board did give raises. So this is what your fund balance, our fund balance, would have looked like had we not given those raises. As you can see, our funding rank was really low in 16-17, 17-18, and 18-19, and it has continued to go down. We were at 63 out of 67, and by 18-19, we had gone down to 61. Our financial condition ratio went from 5.05, and it had crept up a little to 7.35. The next slide shows the actual results after we gave the raises. So in 16-17, our fund balance was 5.05%, and by 18-19, it had gone down to 3.84. What this illustrates is that whenever you do give a salary increase, those costs have to be calculated in future years because they are recurring. And even though in some years you may have a surplus fund balance, and we'll talk about this year, this is one of those years that we have a little bit more, but there's a reason for that, and it doesn't mean it will be sustained in future years. The next slide addresses where we are right now. So we have recalculated this. PEA showed you our January financial statement. We look at this periodically and frequently. So right now our forecast is that we'll be at 6.36% by the end of the year. Some things to notice about this: revenues are slightly down and expenses are down significantly as well. However, a large portion of this was brought over from last year, from 1920. Our ending fund balance was 6.3% in fiscal year 1920, and that's predominantly due to the period of time that we were shut down and the ways that our operations had to change. So we brought forward a balance, and then in this year we do have a large lapse as well. That lapse is due to, again, changes in operations, people retiring, people going to other states. But we do still have and need those positions and intend to fill them. One other piece I want to mention before we, back on that slide before we leave, we wanted to see what it would look like right now if we did allocate the $5.1 million that PEA is asking for, and that would lower our current projected fund balance to 5.16%. And as we've stated all along, this is just a projection. Several things can happen between now and the end of the year. We've seen what happened last year, and none of us knew it was coming, so we do keep track of this continually for you. The next slide is, where are we going to be June 30th of 2022? Well, there are a lot of different variables that we know about right now, and they aren't all of them. Our current budget is based on the governor's budget, which has not been approved or signed yet. So we don't know how those allocations are going to change. In addition to that, we know that we're going to have various operating increases. Those are things such as utilities and basic costs to run the district. Continuing turnaround services. Our turnaround funding was cut last year in the governor's budget. It's lower again, so we need to continue to support those schools, so we will add dollars to that. We support Avid grade recovery for $500,000. We have been told again that there will be another FRS rate increase that's estimated to be $3,360,000. That may change as well. Our health insurance plan, the board was briefed on that at our last board meeting. We anticipate the costs in next year to be $6.3 million. That's an additional $40 per member. Title I had a funding cut, so that's going to cost us an additional $500,000. Minimum wage increase. If it does begin next year in September, our first piece to bring our employees that are below $10 an hour, which includes substitutes, and it includes the FICA FRS that goes against, or FICA Med that goes against that, is $737,000. A large impact to our budget next year is we have an instructional materials adoption. We will be $10.4 million short for that adoption because we usually get we're looking at maybe $7.9 million. The allocation is split up into several different pieces. And in order to be able to provide those materials, that's what we're going to have to supplement from the general fund. Our teacher salary increase next year in the governor's budget is $19.8 million rather than $18 million. So this last line shows the difference so that we're able to take our additional allocation and adjust to that. In this forecast, that's just everything that we know right now. That would put us at a 3% fund balance, which is barely above the state minimum. It's 3.03%. And one drop below that, and that means that we would be subject to have to do a fiscal recovery plan. When you put PEA's proposed wage increase into this amount, it drops us to 1.66%, which would definitely qualify us for a state takeover of the district. We wanted you to see what our minimum wage increase cost would be. It would take a total of 6 years. It shows you all our hourly rates, substitute projections, what the benefits would cost on that, and the total is $57 million within the next 6 years that the district is going to have to plan to cover. The following slide is a chart that shows our estimated financial condition ratio. That's what I explained in the beginning, how we calculate that. So it shows you in fiscal year 2021, we're at 6.36%. 21-22, you see a sharp decline, and we're at 3.03%. By 22-23, we would be at 2.68%. 23-24, we'd be below 2%. And by the time we get to fiscal year 26-27, we would be in the negative. However, there would definitely have to be steps and actions taken before we get to that point. So the moral of all this are the dollars that we spend today will affect our future and how we look in subsequent years as well. So it's important. We're affected significantly just next year, but we need to start planning for the years after. The last piece I'm going to talk about is our COVID expenses to date. We have spent $19.7 million. We were fortunate enough to receive funding from the Board of County Commissioners, which helped us with our initial purchases. And we do have several different things that we have submitted. We were able to do the teacher stipend, which is a wonderful thing. And we still don't know how we can spend our CARES Act 2 funding, when we will get that allocation, or what the actual amount is. I know that comes up a lot, and we received information from the Department of Education today, so I just wanted to share with you. We still don't know that piece.
The special magistrate, with his wealth of experience and knowledge both in the law, in education budgeting in Florida, someone who served on boards and was the general counsel of the teachers union in the state, came to consider and issue a 66-page detailed report on all of these issues. He considered comparing Polk to like districts in terms of wages. He considered available funds. He considered the argument about vacancies. and money being generated by vacancies. He considered our funding for FRS. He talked about recurring funds and non-recurring funds and what's prudent with this expenditure of such funds. He looked at the state law, he looked at our plan, and found our plan TSIA compliant. So this is what he said. He says, at tab 2, pages 25-30, it is concluded that the salary data presented weighs heavily in favor of the district's position that the average salary of Polk's paraprofessionals and education support personnel compare favorably with comparator school districts. He also said, it is concluded that comparatively these rankings reflect Polk's teacher salaries are highly competitive and not outside any standard deviations that would justify additional expenditures this budget cycle. And he explains how he comes to these conclusions in great detail and with evidence. On the TSA compliance, he says, it is concluded here under the circumstances as evidenced on this record. The PA's argument that the district should accept the union's proposed salary distribution plan and engage the Department of Education in litigation, pursuing their interpretation of their legal position is not a reasonable option. At the very least, to do so would create an unnecessary delay in the distribution of TSIA funds and potentially expose the district to penalties, including the loss of this funding. Based in the evidence of record and consideration of the arguments of the parties, it is concluded that the district's plan should be adopted to ensure the swift distribution of these funds to the eligible bargaining unit members. On availability of funds to fund the PEA plan, he said this: it is determined that the evidence on this record establishes that, although Polk is not the most highly ranked among comparable districts, its ranking does compare favorably and does not compel a conclusion that a salary increase for instructional staff is required for the district to remain competitive in the hiring and retention of qualified instructional personnel. He also said, it is concluded that the evidence on this record establishes that the district's position regarding availability of funds is compelling. To fund wage increases beyond those funded by TSIA would place the district in a difficult, if not untenable, financial position. With regard to the availability of funds for an increase for paraeducators and ESP, he said, it is concluded that the proposed wage increase for paraprofessional and educational support personnel is premature, and that the anticipated $2.2 million cost of the union's proposed wage increase for paraprofessional and educational support personnel would unreasonably aggravate the existing situation. It is concluded further that the district's proposed wage freeze for paraprofessional and education support personnel is reasonable under the circumstances. He recognizes that there's work to be done on the minimum wage, and that will come to fruition someday. There will be increases as a result of the constitutional amendment, but he says it is anticipated that the districts, during these proceedings, that the parties will return to the bargaining table to determine how to satisfy the constitutional mandated increases once the legislature acts. So we ask respectfully that you adopt the recommendations of the magistrate and resolve these issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So at this time, it's 6:30. We've been here for an hour and a half. Would the board like to take a quick recess before we get into discussion, or we would like to go forward? I just want to ask. Okay.
We can take a break.
You'd like to take a break? Okay, let's take a 10-minute break. It is currently 6:30. Let's reconvene at 6:40. Thank you. I'd like to go ahead and reconvene. I'd like to go ahead and reconvene our impasse hearing. I'd like to say thank you to PEA and to the district's bargaining team for taking the time today to present to us. I trust that all the board members have had an opportunity to review the information that was provided to you prior to the meeting. And so at this time, I would like to open up our impasse hearing discussion. So the first impasse issue is teacher salaries under House Bill 641, teacher salary increase allocation. In order to resolve the matter of the school district of Polk County and the Polk Education Association, case number SM 2020-019, the disputed issue at impasse regarding the 2020-2021 compensation for the PEA Instructional Personnel Bargaining Unit, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the adoption of the superintendent's recommendation for resolution of the impasse. Do I have a motion and a second, and then we will have discussion?
I move that we uphold the superintendent's recommendation.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. So now it's time for the board to discuss. If you would like to be recognized to speak, I would ask that you as board members please raise your hand so that I can see it. And Ms. Fortney, I guess you'll be on the screen if you should need to speak as well, or let Ms. Warbington know. Okay, we'll start discussion. Yes, Ms. Miller.
I just have a couple of questions to clarify some information. The gentleman spoke about the constitutional minimum wage amendment that's coming up, and it's in the air. With over 60% passage of that amendment, are you saying that you're not sure that's going to happen, or that funding is not going to come with it?
What I'm saying is that there is a set date for the implementation of that constitutional amendment. There's a necessary enabling legislation that's going to have to come out of the Florida legislature during this session that will give guidance. And what the special magistrate said was to jumpstart that and to change the minimum wage at this point in time is premature, and that what we should do is follow what employers are doing, which is to listen for the enabling legislation, and when the day comes when our obligation hits, which will probably be in the next budget cycle, that we do it then.
I have another question concerning some information on your presentation about Les McKay and Family Empowerment Scholarship money. Those dollars, working in that realm as long as I have, those dollars follow the child, so we would have less teachers if we had less students, in my opinion. Is that something that you've taken into consideration?
Those can basically be looked at, they can be looked at as pass-through funds, because when we receive our FEFP, the calculation, the dollars are included in the initial revenue because you don't know the number of kids that are actually eligible or apply for the scholarships. So the district is given the total allocation at that point. By the time you get further into the year, the third calculation, you typically know the actual amount of scholarship recipients, and the revenue is taken off, basically taken off the top of the district's allocation. So what that placeholder on the sheet that we showed you does is it plans for the number of scholarships that we will receive so that we don't overspend our revenue, because that's $11 million that's actually redirected.
Thank you for that. And also, there's been multiple occasions where funding is coming. It's just not, we don't know how it can be allocated. I just want to say in the past, because this is two very different, it's funny how data, depending on who gives it to you, can be very different. We have the worst case scenario, and then we have best possible outcome. My concern is we don't know, and in the past, we've made budgetary decisions that I've gone back to the delegation and our legislators and asked, this is what we had to do because we were told. A lot of it was, no, you should have delved in harder. You should have looked to other places. So I'm a little concerned. I don't want to blame Tallahassee because I don't think that's ever worked for us in the past. And I think we do need to be looking alternative revenue sources, and there's a middle here between the two. But I appreciate both presentations. Thank you.
Okay, board members, anyone else? We have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any other discussion? Yes, ma'am. Ms. Fortney, go ahead.
Thank you. I needed a clarification about the lapse. That's something I've been curious about for quite a few years. Could the PEA side clarify the difference in the lapse figure compared to the district and vice versa?
Lapse, the way that we've typically calculated is the turnover that we have when we're hiring new employees versus employees that are leaving at a higher wage. We've calculated that in the past at about $20,000 per teacher. So if you hire 500 new teachers in a year, we would anticipate that that would give you whatever that math is. Is it $1 million?
Mm-hmm. And then I have a statement, if you don't want to add anything.
Yeah, while lapse is something that we were really looking for, we were going mostly with the absences, the vacancies at this point, because the lapse this year is people left and jobs weren't filled.
I guess my question is that a typical number each year compared to the last 5 to 10 years? What we have with this impasse?
With the number of vacancies,
yeah.
Mrs.
Yes.
Forney?
How many new hires? Anywhere between 400 and 800, it seems.
We've had 700 new classroom teachers come through TIPS.
And
So
how
those are
many of
classroom
those
teachers.
do we generally end up with by the end of the year? We start out with, say, 500. How many do we end up with at the end of the year?
At least the last couple of years that I've looked at, it varies. And to the lapse and FTE point, if we have 532 vacancies currently, if our FTE does decrease next year and we do not have more children come into our county, we just wouldn't hire for those vacancies, and therefore you're not having to budget for 532 if we don't have the FTE to support that. It's not like we have 532 teachers that we would have to lay off because we don't have FTE. We just wouldn't hire those teachers to fill that FTE spot.
That's what I was getting at. I've listened to all the sides and read everything related to this impasse numerous times with an open mind. I'm going to advocate and vote my heart just like I taught. Our support staff has earned the start of a livable wage. Our veteran teachers, including school psychologists, OT, PT staff, our guidance counselors, deserve to be compensated in a fair way without interference from a non-elected official at Florida DOE. The gloom and doom of the budget concerns is due to the politics of public education from the top down, and I feel better times are ahead. And if we support our boots on the ground and compensate them all for the work they perform each day, it is a heavy lift, and I stand with the right side of these issues. I feel in my heart this is why I was elected, and it is my duty to staff and students. Moving forward, we must consider the millage increase to pay our employees. I'll be voting against the superintendent's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fortney. Thank you, Ms. Fortney. Ms. Fields?
Thank you, Ms. Cunningham. I have a couple of questions, but I want to start out with a comment about House Bill 641. When this House bill was originally brought before the state legislature by Governor DeSantis, we were very much against the idea of only giving a certain group of teachers funds and not others. We all were. As a result of that, we had a letter that went to the governor. We also, I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, Mr. Bridges, you can help me, we also collaborated with other school districts to make sure that we were all singing the same song. And at the end of the day, the governor was adamant that he was going to push this bill through, and this is what he did. And by state statute, we are required as an elected official to adhere to the law of the state. We might not like it, but we are required to do so. My question, Mr. Bridges, maybe you can help. Are we the only school district that is before impasse about this item as far as wanting to go against what the governor and the state legislators have approved?
I know there have been several districts that were at impasse. I don't know if there are any that remain at impasse. There are still 3 more. There are still 3 more? Okay.
So there are
Yeah,
3
no,
others.
there have been several. Many of them have been resolved one way or the other.
Okay.
But,
Ms. Cunningham, may I clarify something?
Do you want
And I
Rick to
think
answer?
that will help
Yeah,
clarify.
sure.
Can you what now?
Can I clarify something to Ms. Fields' point?
Sure.
Sure.
So the district team kept saying over and over again with the special magistrate recommendation, I do want to remind, we changed our proposal to be in line with what the district is doing. So we've compressed salary levels just like the district has. We were able to get to 45,172 just like the district. So the proposal in front of you tonight is not the same proposal that we had in front of the magistrate. Okay, we did revise that and bring it to the district's bargaining team. So our proposal is in line with what the district's proposal is also setting forth to do. And just as a clarifying point, 45,172, we both agree on.
Yeah.
And so if you look, even with the number of vacancies now of 532, that at the base level, you're only spending on the district's proposal $6,186,000 for the base. And then our proposal, or sorry, even with the 800 vacancies from the fall, they're still only spending about $6 million of that 80%, which is $10 million if you take out FRS first, or $12 million if you take out FRS after. It's 6 of one, half dozen of another. And so we're doing the same thing now. And we're able to use more dollars to get veteran teachers more money. And we're utilizing the whole allocation while the district is leaving $3 million on the table.
Thank you.
My comments, and thank you, Ms. Yoakum, for that. My comment was to basically let everyone know that we didn't just sit back and not acknowledge that what the state and the governor was proposing was not good for our teachers and our educators. And that was my purpose, but thank you for clarifying that. The other thing is, I feel that we have not done a good job explaining the CARES Act monies that we received and how those monies have been utilized. And it appears that we have all this money to expend. And I know that we don't, but it just appears like we do. So my question is, on page number 54 that was presented by the superintendent's team, it talks about COVID-19 expenses to date, but it doesn't say anything about the revenue. So what revenues have we received? If anybody can answer that for me, how much have we received from the county? And were the county monies expenses the ones that's listed here on page 54?
So you got $30 million in the first
I want her to answer, please. Thank you.
So in our portion that we presented in our presentation, the county, some of the county funds were included in that. We got a little around $9.4 million, and we spent those funds on varying things from PPE to computers to all types of supplies and equipment that we needed to prepare for the pandemic. As far as the CARES Act money goes, the total allocation is a little over $30 million. That's for CARES Act 1. And a portion of that goes to the charter schools and private schools, so we get around $25 million. We have it's a reimbursement grant. So you draw the funds down after you spend them. So we've drawn down about $10 million. Around $8 million, it's $7.9 million of that is what the district has spent so far. And we've purchased computer equipment. We've given the allocation to the charter and the private schools is the rest of the difference. And we've just put in an amendment for $1.7 million to pay for our stipends that we agreed to, the blended learning stipends. So that's gone in. We have around $17 million left to reallocate. Currently, that's budgeted for computers to take us towards the one-to-one initiative and to make sure that our kids that are at home have devices to work on and that our teachers that are teaching from home as well have devices to teach on.
So is that somewhere in this presentation?
No, ma'am, it is not.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying. I'm just saying that we need to do a better job of making sure that when we tell the story, that the entire story is told and not a part of the story, so that everybody can understand what we have, what we've expended, and what's left to be expended, and how those dollars estimated will be expended. The other question that I have, Ms. Wright, is you made a comment that on page 30 of the PEA presentation for the January 2021 board financial packet, they said we had 10.83% as a part of the fund balance, and you said that wasn't true because of the restricted funds that we have. What did you say? Can you repeat what you said?
It is true that that's our total fund balance at that point in time in January. There are different segments. So you have an unassigned fund balance and your total fund balance. Total is everything the district has. Unassigned fund balance is the amount that the board has the discretion to reallocate. So it's everything that's unassigned and then all your items that are assigned. And what that means is if you have something that is certain types of funds that are committed, however they haven't been spent yet, that goes into the general fund financial ratio calculation. So basically, to make it simple, you have to have a 3% fund balance to meet state requirements, but the only two types of fund balance counted in that are your assigned and unassigned. Ours is looking to be 6.36%. We do have a 10.84% fund balance currently, but that's everything, including categoricals.
And I think that needs to be explained, and thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I might have another question or two. I'll just look and come back, please.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Fields. Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My comments are not prepared, so I may ramble just a little bit. Please bear with me. I'm going to be voting in support of the PEA with a caveat. Fund balance is non-recurring. To use fund balance for salaries, I think, is irresponsible. It's like having a checking account with $500 in it and saying we're going to go buy a new car for $25,000. Once you make the first payment, the $500 is no longer there. And when you use fund balance for salaries, the fund balance will decrease at an increasing rate. The only time that we've done that and gotten away with it is if we know we're getting additional revenues the following year. And that's, again, like knowing you're going to get a raise from your employer in the amount of $500 a month. Then you can go buy the car because you're going to have additional funding. You're not going to have to take it out of that account. So, you know, I find it a little troubling when we keep talking about fund balance. It's not recurring. You simply can't use that to any great extent. You have to be very careful how you use it. The other thing is lapse. And Mr. Yearwood's name came up many years ago, working for another organization in another lifetime. Mr. Yearwood and I used that as a strategy. And it worked, but the difference was that organization had a significantly greater fund balance than we do. Our fund balance relative to the size of our budget is pretty minimal, frankly. So, you know, I'm a little troubled by that as well. You know, it's tough being an elected official because there are a lot of agendas, and balancing those agendas is incredibly difficult, if not impossible at times. And I can't begin to imagine what it's like at the state level. And I applaud the governor's initiative here. I think that his intent was to raise salaries for our employees, and I applaud that, and I think that's a great thing for us to do. But there's a problem with it. Many years ago, the state passed some legislation, roughly a decade ago, that caused us to be in the situation we're in today. And that is the millage rate rollback law. If that law had never been passed, we wouldn't be having this discussion today. We would have the funding we need for our school district and for our community. So we have a millage rate, and we have a community that's growing. As that community grows, property values go up, and they go up because people are coming here, and they need services. They need teachers. They need paras. They need bus drivers. And if the millage rate were held stable, we would have the money for those things. And it has not. It's been rolled back. And I did some quick math. We would not be here today if that had not happened. So the solution to this problem is very simple. Stop the millage rate rollback. And I think we could accommodate our teachers and our paras and our cafeteria workers and our bus drivers. And so that is the core of the problem. My fear is that this legislation will have the same impact. We have lost teachers because of the millage rate rollback. We are seeing teachers leave Polk County. We're seeing them leave the state because we can't pay them what they should be paid. And this legislation will have the same impact. It absolutely will have the same impact because what we're going to do is compress salaries. We're saying that and I think it's wonderful that our starting teachers are getting a nice increase, but we're compressing that right up against the salaries of teachers who have been here 5 and 10 years, and that's just not right. The problem is we're going to lose teachers at a faster rate than we gain them. The core of this legislation was to attract teachers, but we're going to see teachers leave. We're going to see them leave Polk County. We're going to see them leave the state, and they're not going to go to charter schools. It's not going to work there either. And so what I heard was that if the PEA prevails, this will go back to the DOE, and that would be my hope, because I want them to get the message that this is not going to work. It's not going to end well for us as a state as it relates to retaining teachers and other employees for that matter. So I would want them to hear that message. Now, I have no intention whatsoever of disregarding state law. I have no interest in that. I have no interest in not supporting the governor and his initiative. I have no interest in not supporting the DOE. So if it goes back to the DOE and they say, sorry, you can't implement this, and it comes back to us, then I will vote for it. I will vote to support the superintendent's recommendation because we will have heard from the DE that that's their intent. But I think somebody has to deliver that message. Somebody has to say to the state, look, this is not going to end well. We can't keep doing this to our teachers and expecting them to continue to take care of our students and teach our students and do all the things they do for our students, which is remarkable to me. But I would also offer this. I would, and I don't know if this is even possible, but in the best case scenario for me would be that we go back and look at the total salaries and rethink that. And that's going to mean that we can't do what the governor wants in the way of starting salaries for new teachers. We more equitably assign those salaries to all of our employees. I don't know if the DOE would be willing to do that or the governor's going to be willing to do that, but if they would, I think that's the appropriate outcome for our district. But again, this is a product of unintended consequences of a law that was enacted a decade ago in rolling back millage rates. I mean, it's hard to believe. It's hard to believe that they would say, that anyone would say, look, your county's growing. As a result, your property values are going up, but we're going to make you work with the same amount of money you had the prior year. We're going to make you take the same amount of money you had last year and apply that to and somehow provide the services you need for more students. It's just, the math just doesn't work. And I think, as I said previously, I think this is going to have the same type of unintended consequence moving forward because our teachers are going to say, why? They'll come here. New teachers will come here, but after a couple of years, they'll say, why would I stay for that money. I'm going to go elsewhere. I'm going to go to another state, or they're going to find jobs in other professions. And you know, we've seen USF close down their education program. I'm assuming that happened because they didn't have enough folks who wanted to teach in our state. So I don't want this to be perceived as a criticism of the governor or the DOE, but I'm surprised nobody's had that conversation, because that is the core problem. We can't keep passing laws that have unintended consequences and not think them through to their end. So that's why I'll be voting to support the the PEA, but I'm not sure that we're going to get where you want to get, even if, you know, we agree with you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Anyone else want to have discussion? Ms. Reynolds, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to talk a little bit on some things that have already been touched, but there was a great, and thank you for showing us a list of what we spent with CARES money. Those dollars aren't recurring, and while they seem to keep coming, we don't know when they'll stop coming. There was a great Senate panel with superintendents probably 2 months ago now in their committee weeks, where they were asking, you know, we've given you all this money, what have you done with it? And one said, you know, you gave us this money and it was supposed to be through September of 22. So we've only spent about 30% of it, but we also didn't know if we were going to get more before September of 22. We found out last week we would be getting more, so now we're trying to figure out how to spend that, but we thought that, you know, we were trying to be careful with spending it because we thought that this is all that we had, and we're trying to stretch the dollars to the best of our ability. And I think that's important to note when we look at the CARES Act money, that we don't know what we can use it for until they tell us. I know there's many of the grant programs that came out of that December bill that we still haven't gotten guidance on. It seems they put a new document out every couple of weeks saying, here's the updated things we think, and then 2 weeks later it changes. So we're still very much in flux of what we can and can't spend that on. And I think that that's important for the public to know, and whatever we can do messaging-wise to let them know, I think is most helpful. I am extremely concerned, much like what Mr. Wilson said about using our fund balance for reoccurring funds. While our fund balance appears to be high, there's things that we know that are on the horizon. I think the chart that you presented, Ms. Jenkins, with what $15 per hour looks like, and that's just if we get them to $15 an hour. That doesn't take into account the people that are making $15.15 and have been here for 25 years. That doesn't include, okay, are they still going to be making $15.15? Or getting them up as well. We don't know. I haven't seen anything in legislation this year so far as to if there will be funding attached to that, which is a little bit scary because we obviously have to follow the law. We want to make sure that we're getting our employees there, but we also don't know if there's going to be any funds tied to that. So all of these things are recurring funds. And then the last thing I want to talk about is vacancies. While vacancies we may not have filled now, I think in your presentation you made a great point of that they fluctuate. Every single day we have someone that's hired or that quits. So it is different today than it will be tomorrow, than it will be on Friday, very likely. And I'm very uncomfortable budgeting vacancies just because we don't ever know how many it is. In a perfect world, we would have every position filled every day. We know it's not a perfect world, but we don't know how imperfect of a world it will be today or tomorrow or next week. And at some point, I would hope that we have most of those vacancies filled, which will then be reoccurring funds for those positions in the future. So by saying we're not going to count them today because they're not filled today, they very well could be filled maybe not tomorrow or by the end of the school year, but a year down the road or 2 years down the road, and we still would be responsible for the salaries at that level. So that's where it gets a little bit scary with fund balance because you start to chip away at it and we get into a position where you can't get it back. So I will be voting to uphold the superintendent's recommendation, but those are a few of my reasons why. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Reynolds. Anyone else? Mr. Allen?
Yeah, I just had a couple questions that I'd like to bring forward. I was just curious, as we think about this, do we have any examples that the compression presented by PEA would not hold back the already committed teacher raises that are there. Have any other districts utilized that same compression mechanism to prove to me that the DOE would not reject it? Now, based on the materials that I have currently from the neutral party is there's been several districts that have already been rejected. Now, a couple things too that I've heard, maybe a question here too. I think the one-time federal payout as a possible solution for me personally brings some issues. And again, I've brought this forward last time that we met as a board, that the Race to Top competitive grants in 2009, when our economy was in a dramatic downturn, was what birthed the VAM scores, and something that we are not in favor of. So I want to be cautious for me to accept the one-time federal payouts as these possible solutions when I'm not asking for more compliance on our teachers in the classroom. I think that's a critical thing. One question as well for the PEA. You noted that Volusia added a longevity supplement for teachers. It seems to be a one-time injection. I was curious, did you even consider that in the negotiations?
So when talking to Volusia's union president, it's in their contract, and I think the way she explained it, it's reoccurring. It's not a one-time bonus.
Mm-hmm.
Just like when we have longevity supplements in our para and ESP contracts, they get those longevities every year unless at the table we both agree to not do it anymore. And so that was how Volusia's was also explained to me. It's not a one-time bonus. Those would be reoccurring funds.
And I can explain a little bit because I see all the salary schedules across the state, and Suwannee County actually put together a salary proposal that they compressed like groups of 3 to 5 years. So it was like 0 to 4, 5 to 8. That hasn't been rejected. And I do have to clarify, Union's proposal that they initially put up was a flat $18.15 for every teacher. And that was what was rejected. And when Union put more money from their own coffers into it, then it was accepted. So it was not anything like what we'd proposed. They were not going to make it. I think they had 7 teachers that made more than 47.5. 7. So they had a different hill to climb. So Union was a flat rate, and Suwannee did have several chunks of banding of groups of people that were lumped together, just like Stephanie's proposal was, where instead of going 0 to 12, it was 0 to 8. And then 9 to 11. So
and that's actually what I modeled it off of because I knew Suwannee's had been approved.
I gave it to her.
Yeah. And so we knew Suwannee's had been approved. And really the compression that we ended up presenting February 25th is not much different than the district's compression. It just groups it into 2 compression groups instead of one big compression group from 0 to 12 on that level. And really that freed up a pretty good amount of money. And then we're utilizing the rest of it to be able to give veteran teachers, the $1,500, which really is more in line with what comparable districts and districts really across the state that couldn't get to 47.5 have done. And so again, we both agree that 45.1 was the minimum base salary, the maximum allowable that we could get with the compression levels that both sides used. And so even getting to that base salary of 45.1, if you can look on page 9, which is slides 17 and 18, just the district proposal, even with the vacancies added now, you're only spending $6,186,000 on that base salary, which you have $10 million in that 80% after you back out the FRS. And so that goes to our point that when you're looking at this law that governs this money, the goal is to get to 47.5. Not very many districts were able to get to 47.5 with the allocation given to them by the state. Some were able to do it because they did put their own money to it, and they were already close enough to where they didn't have to put their own money in. But most districts are in the same position we are, to where they couldn't get to 47.5. And so when you're looking at teachers that are eligible for that part of the allocation, this 80%, you have to look at all classroom teachers that are making currently below 47,500. Because across the state, you can't have one group eligible where more are eligible in another district. You're looking at all classroom teachers that are making below 47.5 right now. And so when you move the base salary up, which both sides again agree, based on our new proposal given to the district on the 25th, that we can get to 45.1, maximum amount allowable. And then we're able to use that rest of that 80% allocation to give to classroom teachers that are currently making below 47.5 to also start bringing people up. And so we've both agreed that the maximum amount allowable is 45.1. And we do agree with the district there.
And then I was curious.
Go ahead. If I may, sir. I just would like to explain, because that's not legally correct, and that's not going to be approved by the Department of Education. The law is clear. You take the 80% of the allocation. You take everyone to a certain number that can be moved to the new number. Everyone is swept up to the new number. You can't treat people in different groups within that number. You can't take money out of that X of number to give to people above. You're not allowed to do that. The commissioner has made it abundantly clear in a memo to Union County School District and to the DRS school at FAMU. You cannot break groups up. Everyone under the number that can move everyone to 45,172 spends all 80%. And everybody moves to 45,172. And this is a very simple law. You can't play around with that. We're not going to get the money if we do.
Yeah.
But you don't spend $2 million moving everybody up to 45.1.
Well, from day one, we have found that to be the case, and from day one, the special magistrate found that to be the case. And now you're agreeing that that's the number. We have to spend 80%. We have to spend 80%
Okay.
to move to 45.1.
So,
Thank you.
So I
Mr.
want to
Allen,
continue
go
on.
ahead.
I do have some prepared comments. I had one last question for Wes. If this was presented, if the PA's position was presented and we roll it up the chains and it gets rejected, what's the timeline of that?
I don't think we know.
Yeah.
I think I think one thing that we can rely upon is that folks at the Department of Education are likely watching this live stream and paying attention to what is going on in Polk County. But I don't think we know what the timeline is. If the board were to reject the superintendent's position and accept the union's position, it is reasonable to assume that the DOE may be critical of that, and that may result in them taking action, as they have suggested they would do in other cases, to say that these funds will not be flowing. Presumably, at some point thereafter, if the district reversed its course and adopted the superintendent's position, and the State Board of Education or the Department of Education believes that that is in compliance with the statute, and their history seems to suggest that they would, then at that time, presumably the money would flow. But I have no idea what the time frame for that would be. It would likely be tied to at what point it came back for the school board, and the school board decided to reverse course or take a different action. And that is speculation on my part, but it's sort of educated based on our experiences. But if DOE rejects it, it seems to me that the ball comes back to the school district, and our position would be: do we want to come back to the board table and take a second shot and see if the Department of Education will approve it? And
Yes, sir.
There's case law that says you cannot have two impasse hearings. You can only have one for each cycle.
that's correct.
So we could not come back and have a second impasse hearing.
Thank you.
No, I don't think it would be an impasse hearing, but the question is, if the Department of Education rejects it, would the school board have the opportunity at that point, without hearing, to?
No, because they're resolving the impasse once, and they can't revisit the impasse.
So you believe that those funds would simply be lost for this fiscal year?
I don't know how we could fix it.
And I think that is a legitimate risk to take into consideration.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Any other questions, Mr.
I
Allen?
would like to release some of my comments here, and then I'll turn it back over to you. Thank
Awesome.
you. So last year's legislative initiative injected a large pool of money to increase teacher salaries. There's no question. With that in mind, I agree that we need to have a twofold approach, it was noted, which recruits and retains great teachers. Our state has made an effort to focus on recruitment. As a board, I think we've made an effort to retain. So I want to unpack that a little bit. So can we do more? I would say absolutely we can do more. Now, as I look at these documents, the stipends are a great example. I still have a lot of questions about the stipends, but I've advocated against blended learning along the way. Managing both spaces in a synchronous fashion is a challenge. Having your class move in and out of quarantine is not fun. I can speak to that personally. When this happens in my classroom, the responsibility, it's heavy. I feel responsible to carry that weight of adjusting and keeping students with it. So if a teacher maxes out their stipend and adds the current wage increase, in my interpretation of this, a teacher that's making $50,000 to $60,000 could see a one-time salary increase of at least 5%. That's not bad in the middle of a pandemic. We all know individuals that are currently on furlough or have lost their jobs. Superintendent Byrd has spoken against that for our district, and we hope that for the best. We do not desire to reduce our workforce. Beyond the positives attached to blended learning stipends, I see the efforts of our district to wisely control and protect the health plan costs to our employees. This is a great thing. That was an additional $9.3 million to our district. When I look at my personal budget, I think the health plan costs are probably some of the highest expenses in our home. We are striving to keep those health plans low for you. Our hopes are that we can see this as an opportunity to retain great people. Beyond the stipends, beyond the healthcare initiatives, veteran teachers, you were honored by this board's recent decision to increase terminal sick time payout. During our last fiscal year, we paid out about $500,000 to veteran teachers' terminal sick time accumulation. That's specific to teachers who have contributed 13 years or more to the district that terminate their contract. Within less than 5 years, that number is going to increase to about $3.5 million. That is something to celebrate because we are celebrating our teachers' commitment to the district. That is not even including teachers from the 3 to the 12-year mark. I want to thank Tedra for doing that and initiating that, and the board for moving that forward. Although the state has focused on the recruiting initiative, we have placed our focus on retaining veteran teachers. This is in the negotiation. In our materials, it's noted that district employees are paid competitively, actually above average. Well, in my opinion, our district should have the most competitive pay for our teachers. However, let's not forget, this is the largest investment in additional recurring teacher salaries in over a decade. Let's not overlook that. Both wage proposals, they result in an increase to all eligible employees. So from the district's perspective, if we were to adopt the PEA's compression scheme, that would place our district in a challenging financial position based on the recurring dollars needed. The result of that 2017 recurring decision is still on us. Now, not only that, if adopted, I believe this proposal would tie up money already committed to our teachers. Just as Mr. Bridges said, from a critical perspective,
One financial proposal noted in our materials referenced new legislation that targets collecting online sales tax as a possible new funding source. I'm cautious to base any of my decisions on something that is not concrete at this point. So as we look to hire a new superintendent, I think it's vital that we provide a strong financial foundation to continue the good work that you are doing, our district is doing. So as I make my ruling, I want to be known that I'm not in favor of holding back the wage increase that 100% of our teachers have already qualified for based on the interpretation of 3 words: maximum achievable amount. I noticed that there were 3,774 teachers, that's over 50%, that will get a bump, a significant bump in their salary. I do not want to hold that back for that large majority of teachers. So we are now one of the last districts holding out and holding back the pay that our teachers deserve. You deserve that. Well over half of our classroom teachers are waiting on a significant bump. I will be voting in favor of what the neutral third party's recommendations were and support Superintendent Byrd's recommendation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Yes, of course. Ms. Miller?
I know everyone in the audience has been here a long time and they've worked all day before they got here. I just want to make a comment based on my colleague, Mr. Wilson, and what one of our members here presented. The word retain. The retention is also part of that recruitment, and we're not doing it well, and we're going to continue not to do it well when we do this to our veteran teachers. So I'm cautious of what we're doing with the dollars, and the difference is so broad. One, we have not done an efficiency audit in this county, and I think the dollars are here whether we're using them now or where we could be using them. And I challenge this board to make that decision and to make that a proposed work session that we talk about efficiency, not compliance. We are very much in compliance, but are all those dollars, this is what I'm asked when I'm in Tallahassee. Your dollars could be used. Are you using all of your dollars most effectively? You can't show me that you are. And so that's different than being in compliance. And we may not even be here if we were doing that or if had done that already years ago. That's nothing to do with current administration. I don't know that we've ever done that as a district, not since I've been around 15 years. So my concern is with retention. And also, we are elected by the public not to check boxes out of Tallahassee. I respect everyone that works in Tallahassee. I've worked closely with the DOE. They don't do that federally. When things come down federally, they do their own due diligence, and they're a legislative body like we are required to do. So I will stand with our workers and our teachers and our support employees that with the PEA, that this is the best for them. And if the DOE comes back and says you can't do it, then we cannot do it. But just to fold before we give them the opportunity to tell us we cannot do it, I don't think is fair for our representation and who elected us to be here. With no disrespect to anyone who's made this, I'm sure the magistrate was very qualified in his ruling and the people that sit here, but my job is to look out for the people that elected me and the people that do the work every day. So I'm going to vote with PEA, and if the DOE comes back and says we can't do it, then it's on the DOE, and it's our job as a district to use our public relations and our marketing to let the public know who wouldn't support that for them, because it wasn't the people elected by this county. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. And now I'd like to offer some comments of my own. There's been a lot said here tonight. It's been a great opportunity to listen to everything that's been discussed. And so for me, I agree with a lot of what each individual board member has said. So the bottom line, because we're all tired, I'm just going to be brief. The bottom line to me is I took an oath, and I took an oath that I would uphold the law and the Constitution of the state of Florida. And Richard Corcoran, who was our Commissioner of Education, and I'm going to read it, that Florida statutes clearly identify specific consequences for superintendents and school board members who fail to comply with statutory requirements and the responsibilities of their positions. And I could continue to read. when we first discussed this as a board, we agreed conceptually with PEA. Of course I want to give teachers the most that we can give. Why would you not? Why are we all here? We're here to educate children, and the people that educate our children are our teachers. But when it comes to interpreting the law, I just don't feel like I don't personally want to play that game. I feel that we need to comply with the law, and then if there's ways that we can go back, negotiate as this next session continues, then let it be at that point in time. So I will be supporting, because I want to obey the law and do the responsibility that I personally feel that I've been given to do so. And I feel that we must uphold the law, the statute that's been given before us, and not interpret it differently than the way in which we have received the information. So I will be supporting the superintendent's recommendation tonight. So let's move forward.
Madam Chair?
Yes,
I just have another brief comment, please.
quick.
Mr. Bridges mentioned that it was likely that folks from the state would be watching this meeting, and I'm going to implore the folks from the state to, there's one simple thing that can rectify this: just stop rolling back the millage rates. I'm not asking them to be increased, I'm just saying stop rolling them back. I'm asking us to provide additional services while holding the revenues constant. It is not a winning strategy. While I find this initiative to be admirable, and I think it's a wonderful thing for our teachers, a far more effective thing to do in helping us provide salary increases is to stop rolling back the millage rate. So I implore our folks from the state to do that. I hope you'll take that into consideration. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. I believe everybody has spoken. There's a motion and a second on the table. So at this point, would you like me to reread the motion? Or is everybody comfortable with the motion and the second?
I'm comfortable.
Okay, so then I'd like to call for a vote. And I probably need to do a roll call vote because different people said different things and I wasn't really counting. So I have a motion and a second. There being no further discussion, I'd like to call for the vote, and we usually do it by district. And Ms. Winchester, would you please keep tabs for us? District 1?
Aye.
District 2? Aye. District 3?
Nay.
District 4?
Aye.
District 5?
Aye.
District 6?
Nay.
District 7?
Nay.
Okay, so the tally is, the motion is approved on a 4-3 vote. So it passed. Board members, the second impasse issue is paraeducator salaries. In order to resolve the matter of the school district of Polk County and the Polk Education Association, case number SM 2020-019, the disputed issue at impasse regarding the 2020-2021 compensation for PEA paraeducators bargaining unit, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the adoption of the superintendent's recommendation for the resolution of that impasse. Do I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Yes.
Ms. Fields?
I think that all of us realize that we have got to do better as it relates to our staff making more than $10 an hour. I think we all realize that. And I know that the first step will be in September if plan goes as it is being proposed. And I am of the opinion that our staff is probably already working on what that's going to look like for us. Again, I'm very much in support of it. I think we need to wait until the implementation in September and start that process and get our employees where they need to be.
Thank you, Ms. Fields. Any other discussion? Ms. Fortney?
little over a year ago in January, when we met at Bartow High School, I showed a pay stub from a para that is a former student's wife. And if anybody on this board could live on that, I want to see how you do it.
Thank you, Ms. Fortney. Ms. Miller?
As I get my mask off. I want to speak specifically to our paraprofessionals, and I challenge people on this board who've never been to a center school, or people in this audience, or the people on these panels who have never seen what paras do every day. We have paras changing feeding tubes, changing adult young male diapers. These paras are working and doing the work that no one else will do for pennies. So I don't think enough people know. I really don't think the community and even the people in this district understand what that means. And to try to recruit somebody to make less than minimum wage, I'm not minimum wage, make less than the $10 an hour, we're not doing it. We're not doing it well. And it's a liable issue. We have liability issues because we don't have coverage. And we're pulling people out of classrooms because we don't have coverage. So once again, I'm going to go back to retention. We're going to go back to retention about Polk County. We're not going to talk about Tallahassee. I'm talking about right here. So instead of just agreeing, I would like to take it back and represent my district back to the DOE and let them say that the wage that we're paying these people is enough, because it absolutely is not. And I think they would do the same in the same circumstances. So I think the paraprofessionals, I know there are people who've never been and seen what these people do. It's more than trying to help a child read. You are literally caregivers, medical grade caregivers that are making ridiculous pennies. And so I want you to know that we do support you. I do support you in what you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Any other comments? If not, I'd like to go ahead and call for the vote. Once again, Ms. Winchester, let's do a roll call vote. District 1?
Aye.
District 2? Aye. District 3?
Nay.
District 4?
Aye.
District 5?
Aye.
District 6?
Nay.
District 7?
Nay.
Ms. Winchester? So the vote carries with 4 yeses and 3 noes. Board members, the third issue of impasse tonight is the educational support personnel salaries. In order to resolve the matter of the school district of Polk County and the Polk Education Association, case number SM 2020-019, the disputed issue at impasse regarding the 2020-2021 compensation for the PEA Educational Support Personnel Bargaining Unit, the chair will entertain a motion for the adoption of the superintendent's recommendation for the resolution of the impasse. Do I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Ms. Fortney?
They deserve a living wage as well. I will be a nay. If you've ever been in a school that is struggling or a school that is exceptional, the heart of that school runs through ESPs. You could not function without them.
Thank you, Ms. Fortney. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'd like to call for a vote. Once again, Ms. Winchester, if we could do a roll call vote. District 1?
Aye.
District 2? Aye. District 3?
Nay.
District 4?
Aye.
District 5?
Aye.
District 6?
Nay.
District 7?
Nay.
Ms. Winchester? Okay, we have the motion carries with 4 yeses and 3 nays. So at this time, I would like to express my sincere thank you to all those involved in this detailed process that has led us to this point. And this will conclude the business of the board. And there being no further business, this impasse hearing of the Polk County School Board is now adjourned. Thank you, drive safely, and good night.